Today, the topic, as you all know, is why is data governance the new buzz?
Now I would like to invite to the stage our second speaker. His name Abhishek Prasad, and he is a senior data governance and strategy consultant at OSTHUS. And today he will speak about his experience in building data strategy, governance framework, data management model, and data quality management and metadata management. Hello, Abhishek. Now,
hello,
the stage is yours, and we are happy to hear your presentation.
Okay, let me also share my screen. So, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Frank, for giving such a amazing presentation, and your experience definitely matters. And thanks for giving me the opportunity for presenting in this meetup. So the presentation that I would do would probably have the following agendas that I'll try to cover. It would encompass a bit of a history of data management, some of business drivers, building data strategy and governance framework. I'll also touch base on maturity models, data quality management, and if time permits, we'll also go through some metadata governance, metadata management, and what would be an ideal approach for stakeholder governance communication strategy. Okay, so before we go to the data management and data governance in general, I would just broadly walk you through how the evolution eventually started of managing the data and governance in general. So you would see some years over here on the screen, and you would see some economic shocks that eventually happened at a certain period of time, which eventually resulted into introduction of some regulations and so on and so forth. So we start with 50s. Computers were very slow, clumsy, labor intensive to operate. In 60s, there was the concept of data management and governance was introduced by DPSO, primarily for training and quality metrics. So in the 70s, there was a UK banking crisis. SQL was developed, by the way, and the relational databases concept was introduced. Eventually, we started managing more and more data, and of course, the regulations were part of it. 80s, again, DEMA came into existence. It was a governance body, basically talking about best practices in data management, data governance space. And also encourage data literacy around the wider stakeholder audiences. 98, there was again NoSQL, a big data came into picture, gained popularity in 2005 eventually. Somewhere in 2000, there was a dot-com bubble, and you would have seen a lot of initiatives from cloud data management, specifically AWS, Salesforce, and there was a slight growing trend from more and more data getting managed because of the big data initiatives in general, and also a decentralized way of storing data. There was eventually a subprime crisis somewhere in 7 and 10, and a debt crisis in 2019, which eventually led to a lot of regulatory introductions for investment banks and asset management world. And over here in 2018, you would see a deep learning, AI, and augmented reality part of the curriculum in most of the universities. And slowly, people are taking data science as a more serious stream as opposed to the earlier advances. So you would see the volume of data eventually growing over a period of time, and more regulation as well eventually coming to the picture. 2020, we have coronavirus, and now most of the medicinal research and life sciences spaces are being primarily run through supercomputers and those sophisticated AI algorithms to search for a new vaccine. And it is also predicted by IDC that 2025, the users will create approximately 463 billion GB of data per day. So why it is necessary is that we are basically creating more and more data as we progress, and we are becoming a more data-centric society in general, where data plays a very critical role in our life to take important decisions. And that has been part of the most technology companies as well. It's part of more and more day-to-day engagement that even normal people like you and me do. Yeah. So this particular slide again talks about some of the key data drivers and challenges and what are the corresponding business stakeholder perceptions to these. And these are again picked up from real life scenarios where you have businesses talking about it costs us too much to run our data estates. And they also complain about IT is too slow to deliver new products and services. We also have poor data quality. That's something that you hear very often. Um, and some of the challenges you see is we can't find the data we need, but where do I have to go for it? For example, if you're working in a lab or a lab scientist, then you don't know where to look for vaccines or clinical trials data. And 80% of the time that you spend on analysis of your data, where to find, those can be spent on running your algorithms. So just imagine the data scientist, for data scientists, it's a real nightmare just to find the information, the correct set of information with the right set of data quality to run their algorithms. How do I store all the research data economically? And that's a very big question for most of the big firms talking about data archiving, where archiving is also not only regulated by big regulatory bodies, but it is also at times business of business value to them. So, for example, if some research has been done on certain vaccines in past couple of years, it might happen that those researchers would be valuable at some time in the future as well. So, physical storage versus cloud storage, that's again increases your total cost of ownership of data archiving. I need to standardize my data. So if you're a company who's doing joint ventures, alliances, collaborations, a lot of doing researches to tackle huge projects, doing it with different universities and based out in Germany, in France, and US, then sharing data becomes a critical challenge as well for them, specifically if they're in different formats. Talking about you cannot locate your data when I need it. It's similar kind of questions when posed by most of the data consumers, data scientists. The last one is very common, organizational inertia around data ownership and accountability. That means data owners are typically resistive to the changes in actually playing stewardship responsibilities to managing the data effectively. And if you're a scientist, you've been doing this from past 20, 30 years, and you're being asked to change the process for better data management activities, it becomes a bit inconvenient for you because it kind of increases your total business processing time. But in essence, increases your total overall time to process something. But at the end of the day, it delivers more value. But often more than not, people choose to avoid this because, people love shortcut. So this particular slide talks about data governance for SML enterprises, so small, medium, large enterprises, and data governance in general. Is a process of formalizing and setting standards, defining rules, establishing policies, and implementing oversights. And why this is important is because whether you're a small, medium, or large enterprises, if you're using data to drive decisions and it's impacting your day-to-day lives, then it's imperative that you manage it and govern it properly. At times, this quote that I mentioned, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, it's about learning to dance in the rain. So a non-invasive approach is always suggested or advisable in these scenarios when you're trying to apply governance, because bear in mind that governance should not hinder with the progress. Does not mean that you need to inhibit or compromise on the overall benefits or sharing and collaboration. It should not be acting as an impediment to your existing business processes. So what it means is that you need to formalize the existing way of managing data. And if that can be formalized, it really helps in overall generating value for the organization. And so data governance is generally seen as a couple between a business and technology, and it drives information and governance over here. DCAM is also an industry-wide assessment framework which is available for its members to use, and it provides your 7 levels of various maturity assessments that you can perform on the data that you manage. And yep, it is something that is widely used in, preferably used at least in large enterprises and medium enterprises. But for small enterprises, I think the approach for a non-invasive, that means starting with just formalizing the way that you handle data or handling more stewardship responsibilities, plays a very important role. In the next slide, talks about a typical data governance framework, where data governance plays an important role between the management and the data management function, where management is defining your business strategy, and data management is basically executing those strategy and business processes that touch the data. But where does data governance comes into picture? So data governance is formalizing that process and defining those data strategy in form of building more rules, policies, procedures, designing an org structure that fits the organization. You have identified stakeholders, stewardships, and then you have more focus of a goal, value identification, and funding your initiatives that are more data driven, creating matrices and KPI structures that you in a way that you measure your data quality. And of course, this is closely also helped and basically supported by data management maturity model, where you have various levels, which basically provides as a guidance to or builds roadmap for your data management or data governance strategy. So is data governance relevant for all small, medium, large enterprises, or in other words or layman terms, which I say the juice is worth the squeeze? Data governance is definitely relevant for all, whether you're small, large, or medium company, and because the application of FAIR is applicable to whether you're dealing with a small data, large data, or even with a medium-sized data. FAIR stands for your findable, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. So regardless of your size, if you're dealing with data, data quality is definitely an issue if you're taking decisions based on your data, and if you have a high total cost of ownership. If you're a company who is dealing with any kind of regulations, for example, if you're in banking side of things or asset management, you have BCPS 239, MiFID 2. GDPR is completely domain agnostic, so more or less all companies who are handling chunks of data, they need to abide by GDPR regulations. GXP is again a regulatory framework which is there primarily in life sciences and healthcare industries. SOX is again mostly relevant for most of the domains in the organizations. If you're also a company who's dealing with legacy systems, data integration becomes a challenge for you. So it creates a lot of silos, and then managing the information and even the quality becomes a nightmare. And the final thing is traceability and findability of data. That means you're not able to find your information whenever you need it the most, or you cannot run your advanced analytics and NLP algorithms or AI algos, because you're not able to trace your data, you're not able to find data. Which database do I need to connect? How do I reach out to this particular data? And if you're an organization which have to report to any of these regulatory bodies, that's imperative that you also provide traceability of the data. That means what's your origination, system of consumption, and intermediary transformation that happens at times is also needed. Yeah. Moving on to the next. So what is the recommended approach for our enterprise data strategy? The enterprise data strategy could be a sequential approach in this fashion, so where you can define or register your authoritative data sources, provide an enterprise data catalog. These two capabilities will eventually help you find your data quickly. The next step could be data you can understand. So that way you can have an enterprise data model, a business glossary, and a data dictionary. And a business glossary and data dictionary is just a compilation of your technical metadata. Business glossary is basically combination of your technical metadata into business glossary terms or business terms that is commonly used in the business. Data that is factually correct. So that means that is data quality management and data quality reporting. These two are different aspects. So where you're reporting the data quality issues within your organization, and then you have appropriate measures from profiling your data and also taking care, doing root cause analysis, and make sure that you do any kind of architectural changes if needed to correct those data. Data is complete. That means you have data contracts in place. A data contract is basically an agreement between a data consumer and data producer to ensure that there are certain criteria that are fulfilled before the data is exchanged from producer to the consumer. These criteria could be in form of standard formats, and so on and so forth. Data is consistent. That means integration framework and reference data services are available, and data that you can trace. That means you have a lineage in place, and this could be as simple as a very high-level business lineage, or it could be as detailed as a technical lineage, which is useful mostly for developers or data engineers who are working on a data pipeline. So at the end of the day, once you have or meet all these sequential steps, you can treat data as an asset, and you can run your data science and advanced analytics streams, and it will give you most generated values out of these, because then you are able to trust your data. Your data is factually correct, and you are able to find your data. And in general, in principle, you are able to address the FAIR principle on all levels. Yeah. Primarily, this slide talks about the data strategy and how it's a key challenge these days. What I have seen is typically organizations have a very strong hindrance towards moving from an application-centric to data-centric world. And primarily this has been region because companies have been operating in this region for a while now, for more than 20, 30, 40 years, so on and so forth. So the mindset of moving from application-centric to data-centric is very critical. This paradigm shift is very difficult to attain. And primarily, the reason being is that most organizations think that application governance is the same as data governance, which is not the case, because your data can reside in more than one applications. And then you just can't replicate the way you manage your applications to the way that you manage your data. So it's a change in the mindset and the perspective altogether. This particular slide again gives you a very high-level picture of how generally the org structure works in most of the organizations. And typically, you have a bare bone. We can have a bare bone structure like this, what you see on your screen in blue, or you can have a very strong federated central plus federated structure like this over here. So that means you have other DG teams, and you have a chief data office and enterprise data council in place, where people or representatives from each business divisions go and meet and raise their day-to-day data issues, data objectives, and strategic data issues and projects, initiatives, basically. Some of the roles that you see over here, for example, governance manager, a business steward, content owner, consumer. These are the roles that has evolved over a period of time, and people are in general changed the nomenclature from being an IT service owner or IT platform or IT or application owner to a data platform owner, an IT architect to a data architect. A data consumer is definitely somebody who consumes data, but content owners are basically business-oriented roles. Business data steward is basically supporting the data content owners in day-to-day stewardship activities, which is more or less hands-on roles. And more of these things that you see on yellow or maybe orange over here is basically their part-time roles. That means people are already executing more or less these roles in their current way and format. All you have to do is to identify those people and formalize the process that they are currently performing through these tasks that is already there. And then you have governance manager and steward, technical data steward, who are mostly running this and providing arbitration activities between various other data governance teams for cases where who owns the data. The questions like, how should I access something? what is my authorized data source for certain specific set of data if I want to run or gain access to that. These kind of questions are mostly dealt with by these two folks over on the top, and are also probably responsible for representation of specific business units on enterprise scale, or enterprise level. I would like to touch base on data management maturity model. So this one, the maturity models are primarily are tools to provide guidelines to help organizations to build and improve and measure the enterprise data management capability. It is consistent organization-wide framework, and it's used to implement data management practices. This leads to data that's accurate, timely, accessible across the entire organization. And the DMM follows data strategies, policies, and regulations that aligns with industry standards. So why more and more organizations are leaning towards DMM and thinks DMM is a part of that strategy? Because it provides a step-by-step approach of how you should build and embed and measure data management capabilities in your organization, and a standard method, industry-wide standard method for each data division or maybe business division in your organization, the way they can track the progress. They can also benchmark their data capability with internally among other business units, and also outside one industry to the other industry, and maybe with the peers altogether. It also provides a granular list of artifacts to demonstrate evidence and progress. I've also written a small article on this. You'll find this on the LinkedIn, but if you want to know more about this, you can go over here. In this slide, what it talks about is various levels of maturity. So you have lots of data management maturity models available in the market, a few from DAMA, CMMI, which is Stanford Institute of Management Maturity Model, IBM Data Governance Maturity Model. You have one from DCAM. But in principle, what they're eventually talking about is various levels of how you mature over a period of time, and various competence and capability matrices. In principle, I've seen that over a period of time, as you progress in your maturity, a certain state is reached where you are able to, at times, realize the maximum value of your data governance program. And thereafter, at times, you would see that any further improvement does not reap really a lot of ROI with the investment that you're making. So the movement thereof at times is often seen as discretionary by many organizations, but it is always an incremental and good to have approach. But the maximum value realization often happens to seem between 4 and 5, as is something that we have observed through our years of implementation of these models. Okay, so touching base on data quality management. Quality management is again defining the process which requires and ensures data content is sufficient and quality supported, defined, and business strategic objectives. Obviously, quality is a consensus-based approach. It's not something that's a responsibility of an IT division or just your business. It's a collaborative approach between the IT and the business. And like it says, it takes a village. Data quality is not the sole responsibility of data governance body. So data quality management describes the capability needed to ensure that quality objectives are realized. And basically it entails your profiling, quality measurements, defect or issue tracking, root cause analysis, and what are the remediation actions that you have placed in for any kind of data quality issues thereof. Little bit on metadata governance and management. So a metadata can be further described or split into 3 types of data. You have a business metadata, you have technical metadata, and operational metadata. Business metadata again provides more context about the data from the perspective of business processes. Technical metadata describes the creation, organization, and movement of change and storage of the data For example, your schema table columns of your database or the lineage in general. Operational metadata contains information that is available in operational systems such as runtime environments from the perspective of process execution. For example, data file size, runtime statistics. I haven't given any business data metadata example, but it could be, for example, your data steward owner name and who's owning the data. Those kind of information is again a business metadata. And the typical governance process, so you have, Frank has also touched base on elaborately on these aspects of master data, reference data, and transaction data. So you have something called critical data element. And the critical data element is basically aligned to critical business element and is deemed materially important. The idea behind identifying your data domain or critical data element is very important for governance. So as Frank mentioned earlier in the presentation, you just can't govern everything within your organization or within your business. So it's very imperative for you to identify the data domains that you want to govern. Those are critical for you. And within those data domains, you identify what are the critical data elements that is imperative for a specific process execution. It could be critical because you need it for your regulatory reporting. It could be critical because you just can't process your business process execute your business process because those data elements are needed and very important for processing. So master data is again entities, relationship attributes critically shared across the enterprise. Reference data is basically a subset of your master data, which defines your set of allowable values, which are more or less statics. Transaction defines set allowable values to use by other data fields. Over here, you would see a data glossary. In this, a typical data glossary has a data dictionary, which is your technical metadata. And your data schema table columns, which is your data dictionary, is described by your business glossary. So a business glossary basically has a logical abstraction of your schema table columns. So let's say if you're measuring something like percentage return on your assets, you have 10-year return, 5-year return, and 20-year return. A business glossary or business term would be your benchmark returns, and then you define your business benchmark returns. What is the definition to it? So similarly, your schema table columns will forming a part of your dictionary, and then you have a logical abstraction of that in your data element in your business glossary. And then ideally, most organizations, what they do is they provide an interface portal through a tool to access this through wide enterprise. And that's something that is also available across organizations. So now there are a gamut of data governance tools which provide you data cataloging facilities using which you can access this easily through your interface across enterprise. Last, I would just like to touch base on stakeholder communication strategy.
Just one short notice. You have just 2 minutes, otherwise we're a little bit over time.
Okay.
That's good.
Then I'm just finished now. Basically, the communication strategy deals with the approaches that you should ideally split your target group, target audience for data governance into various groups. It could be a senior management, data domain owners or stewards. You have operational level people. Then you have a group of information technology or IT guys and any data governance partners. And then you can split your communication strategy between orientation. That means you're onboarding people towards making them aware of data governance. Onboarding communication, that means you're providing them more information around policies, procedures, and documentations, and charters and principle. Ongoing, that means how your data governance is faring across overall performance over a period of time, and overall how the maturity has increased or decreased based on your performance metrics, data quality metrics, and so on and so forth. Yep, I think I'm done. So I'll wait.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting, and I think my data governance skills improved now.